thank you all for sharing. And thank you again for being here tonight. We don't typically do a lot of announcements, but we have a couple that I want to make sure to share before we get in. Sometimes we don't do announcements because I always forget to talk about them. So a couple weeks ago, we brought up the idea of something we're calling our Extend the Joy gatherings for this summer. And so the idea there is to take something that you are already doing, something that you enjoy doing, and think about how we could create a stress-free way to include more people in that as we extend the fellowship and extend the joy throughout the summer. So there's already been some great ideas getting floated with gardening and maybe meditation circles and times at the park and going on walks and coffee shop ideas. So there's a few ideas brewing out there in the collective. So no pun intended with the coffee. So I hope that you all are continuing to think about some possibilities that you might like to be a part of. I might be reaching out to some of you just to see if there's anything I can do to help you. And we really hope to create some spaces this summer where people can feel the same love and acceptance that we do here in this fellowship at Hope on Sunday nights, and kind of extend that out into the larger community. Also, it's kind of hard to believe, but Easter is 2 weeks away. It's kind of coming up really quickly. So a couple of things that we have going on that are special this time of year. Sparta United Methodist Church and Hope Fellowship are actually co-sponsoring an Easter egg event in the community next weekend. It's on Friday and Saturday. And kind of the idea is Kyla and Christine, you can correct me if I say anything wrong here, but they're going to be at several times throughout the weekend hiding Easter eggs with prizes in them around the community. And then you and your family can just go out and find them at your leisure throughout the weekend, which is a really fun way for, just to do something fun as a family together. So that's going to be next weekend. And then the week after that, we are going to have, for Good Friday, we're actually going to have a prayer walk event set up at Krause Park, where you can come at any time. We're going to have some stations set up with plastic bags and some cards that you can get out. Good Friday is a good time to, maybe if you have something in your life that something in your life that maybe you feel like you're letting go of, maybe something in your life that you're losing, something in your life that you feel really needs a breath of resurrection. Good Friday is a time to pray about those things. So we want to give people some space, maybe with guided prayers, just some space to walk and pray, and maybe even do that with others if they'd like. So we'll have more details about that coming out this week. And then Easter, it's kind of our tradition at Hope Fellowship to do, we typically meet at night, but Easter we like to do earlier in the day for multiple reasons. Maybe people want to gather with family, or Easter just feels like a good daytime activity. So we're going to we will not have our Sunday night call on Easter Day, and we'll actually have it in the late morning. And this week we'll send out an email with the exact details. But one thing we've always done that we're going to continue this year is instead of a story sharing time, usually at Easter we invite people to share a quote or a poem or a short reading that has been meaningful to you, especially one that kind of has hope as a theme or new life. So that's something we'd like to kind of plant a seed for tonight for you to start thinking about if there's something you'd like to share on that Easter gathering. And again, we'll send an email out this week with some of those details, but I just want to let you all know that those things are coming up. So we have been here at Hope Fellowship talking about a conversation series that we're calling The Way of Jesus. And the reason that we've been calling it that is because the earliest followers of Jesus called themselves the way or the road or the path of Jesus. They saw it as the continuing example of following Jesus as a pathway to abundant living and deep connection with God. In the first 2 weeks, we've talked about how fellowship was an important part of Jesus's ministry, and it was an example that he gave to his followers how to connect more deeply with each other and with God. And we talked about the Lord's Prayer, Jesus's prayer last week, as an example of that as well. And this week, we are talking about a really important aspect of the Jesus way, and that is love made real in the world. And we're using that phrase because what Jesus did was bigger than just compassion or bigger than just serving others. It was experiencing the love of God and then partnering with God to bring into the world that love in a real and tangible way. It's about taking the amazing growth and transformation that's happening within us through Jesus and then allowing that to transform the world around us. So there's a Jesus story where he puts this right on display. It happens during the context of the last meal that Jesus shared with his friends and followers. And I thought that tonight maybe we could read a shortened version of that. So I'm going to put it on the screen. This is from John chapter 13. And I just want to be clear, this is not the entire chapter 13 that we are going to read. So if this is really interesting to you and you'd like to read more of the story, John 13 is where you're going to want to look. But this is a shortened version of a story where Jesus has this very powerful interaction with his friends and followers. So I'm wondering if maybe we could have a few people take some turns to read the words that are on the screen here. Kind of broken it up into 4 chunks. So I'm going to put my microphone on mute, and if anyone wants to read that, please go ahead.
Before the Passover celebration, Jesus knew that his hour had come to leave this world and return to his Father. He had loved his disciples during this ministry on earth, and now he showed them the full extent of his love. Jesus knew the Father had given everything into his hands and that he had come from God and was returning to God.
So he got up from the table and took off his robes. Picking up a linen towel, he tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a wash basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with the towel he was wearing.
After washing their feet, he put on his robe again and sat down and asked, "Do you understand what I was doing? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, because that's what I am. And since I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash each other's feet."
I had given you an example to follow. Do as I have done to you, dear children. I will be with you only a little longer. So now I'm giving you a new commandment. Love each other. This is how everyone will know that you are my disciples, when you love each other.
Thank you all for reading that. I've always loved hearing multiple voices read these passages together at Hope Fellowship. You know, this is a story that, just to give a little background to it, there was a hospitality expectation in this time that Jesus and his followers were living. And the idea is that when you came into someone's house for a gathering, for a meal, there was someone, sometimes a servant, sometimes someone at the lowest social standing that happened to be in the room, if there wasn't a servant, would wash everyone's feet, kind of wash the dirt and the grime and whatever else from the day off of the people who were coming in so they could recline and eat without the day on their feet. And you kind of get a sense in this story that maybe there wasn't, this is kind of an impromptu, hastily arranged meal. You get the sense that there wasn't a servant in the room, and so there wasn't a clear understanding of who had the lowest social standing and had to do this job. You may remember often in the stories of Jesus and his disciples walking around, the disciples are almost constantly arguing over which one of them is the best. And so you can imagine that they are not rushing to see who is going to take the lowliest job of washing people's feet. And so Jesus does this as a loving act to set an example and illustrate the whole point at the end of his life, the whole point of what this was all about. And as we see it at the end of that, the whole point is that we love each other as Jesus has loved us. I want to share a video with you that Kyla actually found this week. It's a short 3-minute video with Brene Brown talking about her interpretation of why Jesus's love is so important. And she kind of references this story, or the video alludes to this story a little bit. So it's about 3 minutes long. Let's watch this together and we're going to talk about it a little bit. If there are any issues with the video, please let me know.
Jesus makes complete sense to me.
Why?
Because this is my whole thing. I believe God is love. It's that simple and that complicated. And so if you tried to express love to human beings and just came down and said, I am love, love each other, we automatically, because we're so afraid of hard things, we would automatically go to like unicorns and rainbows. And so you would have to send someone to show what love in the flesh looks like. You would have to send, what does love look like? And so otherwise, we would romanticize it. We would turn it, we would make it easy, because that's who we are as people. We're gonna make it easy. And so then Jesus comes and says, okay, I am love. I sit with the people you're not allowed to talk to. I do all the hard things. I make all the hard choices. I love the people that are unlovable. I feed the people who are not supposed to be taken care of. I don't tolerate shame. I don't tolerate attacks. Like, I'm love, and it's hard and messy and dirty. And if you really love, I mean, fear.
Sound kind of cut out there for a second. I'm going to back it up.
And if you really love, I mean, fierce, big love, you'll become dangerous to people. And so there's no way that most of us could have understood what love was without seeing what love looked like. So to me, it makes perfect sense. And so God is love, and Jesus is what love looks like made flesh. And it's hard, and it's not the default, and it has nothing to do with rainbows and unicorns and fluffy stuffed animals. It's about choosing what's right over what's easy. We don't want love to be that.
Kind of a lot well said there in 3 minutes, huh? So I'd like to ask you all, after watching that, according to her in this video, why do you think we need Jesus to show God's love to us in the real world? Why did we need Jesus to show God's love to us in the real world?
I wonder if we would try to justify, well, like we have done, I guess. We would try to make it so that there were things that we would do that we would have to earn love. Then it becomes conditional, so it's a dangerous slippery slope there to know what was hoped for, but then to have all these rules and guidelines that would then make love conditional rather than it's for everyone. It's here and accessible to everyone. Yeah.
We need to hear that directly from God. Otherwise, we just find, I think the natural human tendency is to try to figure out who's out and who's in, and who gets to decide. There's a lot of volunteering for that role of deciding who's in, and who's out. pretty enthusiastic volunteering for that role, and to have Jesus come into the mix and be the smartest person in the field or in the room or in the world, and live a perfect life and have that divinity and that humanity, and then to say it and to say that that's the whole point. It kind of well, it should anyway, take away our ability to escape that truth. I don't know that it has necessarily, because we find our way back to that idea of who's in and who's out, even though Jesus was pretty adamant about hierarchical levels and conditional love not being a part of it. But I'm glad we had a divine voice on earth unequivocally stating that.
It's so easy. It's difficult, I think, for us to understand that it's just that simple. That just can't possibly be right. How can it just be love each other, period, the end? That's all, no conditions. We overthink, we overcomplicate. That's our nature as humans. And so I just don't think there's any way we would have ever figured that out on our own. And we still struggle with that. And we know, we know that love is love. That is all. You love your neighbor, every single person, period. But that just can't be right. Society just doesn't support that very well.
One of the things that I noticed by these examples is that, and by other examples, is that Jesus was always going against the current. And that I like today, if we wanted to wash somebody's feet, they would think we were nuts. But in that culture, that was an expected thing, but it was an expected thing for somebody of a low or lower caste to do. And to get, people of a higher caste to do what a lower caste does would be like a shock, a real out of pattern experience. And so I think Jesus was constantly creating moments when you would be present. Because when we think that, like with that little clip in the movie, she was saying that if we do the easy things, we give bunnies and we give flowers and we go around, we purchase a few things, and he said, well, here's my love. But that doesn't make you present. If you did something unusual with that flower, you might be more present. And I think love is presence, using the culture to create presence so that you can awake. Like in the Garden of Gethsemane, the whole purpose was to awake, not fall asleep. And then he does, obviously on Easter, the ultimate out of pattern event. He gives his life. And look how long that outer pattern event lasted, over 2,000 years.
I think for me too, it's an example of that love is about serving and giving more than getting. And that goes along with it's not about the easy stuff either. And it's not about the rainbows and the unicorns and all that. That stuff's nice. But it's about, for me, the serving, and it's not about status, like you were saying, and Jesus washing the feet just blows that all to pieces, and I love that, because that for me it brings that into just creates the anonymity where we're all on equal footing. We're all human beings and we are all deserving of love, no matter, and nobody gets to judge or decide who deserves it and who doesn't. Everybody needs love. And that's what Jesus teaches me, everybody. And those that are hardest to love probably need it the most. And so, yeah, that's what I need, the example. I need to be reminded often.
I noticed how he always finds the need and fills it. The people needed food, so he did the fishes and the loaves. People needed wine at the wedding, he did that. The woman at the well just needed somebody to care and sit and talk to her. Then this situation, they needed their feet done. Didn't matter status, they needed it, he filled it. And so that's what I noticed, that he's always looking for the need and then fills it.
And recognizing in that, he gave us an example that love empowers, love is intimate, regardless of who you are. Everybody deserves to be touched, to be seen, to be heard. And I think by sending Jesus to live that out, people could see it demonstrated in real life. It's one thing to read a book about it or have someone tell you about it, but when you see it lived out, it gives you an example in real time to follow of what it looks like to give somebody of your time and your love and your energy, and in a way that builds them up and helps them to be the fullest version of themselves as well. It's not just looking out for your own interest, but for other people.
I'm also hearing an element that's not at all literal, much more symbolic, that he knew that they were about to start on a path without his physical presence. And in a way, it was a clearing to start afresh. And that's the part that rings loudest for me.
I'm thinking too about, Rachel, what you said about Jesus meets the need that is there. Just how easy it is to meet needs that don't exist, or to create needs to meet, or to meet needs that we feel like meeting because in some way they do something for us. And Jesus takes the time to listen and pay attention and see. I'm hearing that my mic is quiet. I don't really know what's going on. Sorry about that.
I can hear you.
But he just the loving care to be present in the moment and to address the need that's actually there, which even if that requires stepping into that role of washing the feet, that lower caste thing, that was a shock. The next question I'd like to ask you, and I'm going to try to post it here in the chat. Brene Brown said in that video, a quote, "Love is often choosing what is right over what is easy." So in the world that we live in today, like in this present moment, in what ways do you think that is true? It's one of those statements that may not always be the case, but in what ways do you think it's true that love is often choosing what is right over what is easy? What rings true about that for you?
I'll start with the opposite. I think it's been very easy to be more hateful and more judgmental, hiding behind the guise of posting a comment somewhere and it's not face to face, or jumping on a bandwagon of things that you hear without discovering for yourself or finding out information on your own. So I think it's really easy right now through social media, through not being as personally connected to other people, to say things that we wouldn't necessarily say to a person if we were in a relationship with them, or even in a face-to-face conversation. So it's been really easy to choose the easy thing over the right thing, because it's a lot easier to say something behind somebody's back or under the guise of anonymity, but not necessarily the most loving thing to do.
Yeah, kind of building off of that point there, those kind of snap judgments, which are very well documented psychological tendencies that we have, and biases that we carry with us in interacting with different people and navigating different situations. And so often those biases don't lead us toward the type of love that we're talking about right now. So often those biases lead us toward closing off a person, or a more generous action, or fill in the blank manifestation of that love. And so what is hard to do is to check our biases, be conscious of them, and in the moment do what is right, meaning do what is loving. I guess I wrestle a little bit with the, what is right over what is easy, just because I think it's, in some ways, it's a phrase that has been weaponized in the church, in my view, over the last 20, 30 years. And so it's not actually pointing towards that. It's not actually been pointing towards loving behavior. It's been pointing towards, in my view, some fairly arbitrary battles that weren't very good choices to pick up and battle instead of focusing on love. And kind of to your point, Ben, earlier, like making up a need and then filling that need versus actually listening to the needs of the world and stepping into that in love. That's hard to do. It's a lot easier to come up with a need or a problem of your own kind of, making or definition, and then fill that. But so often the route of love is listening and empathizing and seeking to understand, and going outside of your own perspective, limited perspective and lens, to really meet people where they're at. Like Rachel was saying earlier, that's what Jesus did every step of the way, was he met people where they were at. That's sometimes hard.
And being willing to step into something that is maybe messy or complicated. Our minds might be tempted to try to compartmentalize things or keep things neat and tidy. You do this, you go here, and then you move along a certain way, but really love is complex, and relationships and people are all complex, and growing and learning, it's all it's complicated and it's messy and it's beautiful and wonderful, but you have to be willing to set aside the feeling of security that might come with being able to predict what's going to happen next. And so we have to be willing to sort of set that aside and have faith.
Just one more small tangent. One of the big trends in management theory and research in the last few decades here has been this shift out of the previous 100 years, which was all focused on kind of mechanizing things and making things more efficient and streamlined and linear and breaking it down to its part. You think about the factories and the manufacturing lines and so forth. And now we live in a world, particularly the US lives in this world of creative problem solving. And so we're having to sort of retool how we do education. We're having to retool how we set up organizations. And so much of it is moving away from, I think, what was reflected in some of the church's even behaviors and theologies of the last 100 years, which was really trying to kind of break things down into steps, linear steps and check boxes, and love and loving people, and sort of like finding solutions together and finding growth and community together doesn't work like a factory. It just doesn't work that way. Be nice if it did, maybe, but it would be way less artistic and poetic and beautiful in my view. And I think that there's a little bit of parallel there with our economy shifting from kind of your assembly line to creative processes, and our theology shifting. Speak for myself. My theology shifting from neat check boxes to the kind of chaos and messiness and unpredictability and beauty of love and relationship. I'll shut myself up now.
Thank you for sharing that, and I particularly appreciate you sharing that you saw some ways that a phrase like that has been weaponized by the church over the years, because that's exactly why I asked the question that I just did. I think it's really important to unpack phrases that sound like that sometimes, to make sure that we are actually moving forward in love the way Jesus set the example for, and not in a way that does the opposite. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I was hoping that would. It's always okay to say you don't agree with a statement, because it's good to unpack it. Any other thoughts, John? It looked like you might have been moving towards your mic. I'll be quiet here.
My habit pattern. One experience that happened to me when I was involved with a particular spiritual group, and I was leading this group in Detroit, and one particular fellow was having problems, relationship problems, and I tried to help him. And over the weeks, I thought I was helping him. And one day he came up to me and he said, "Can I offer you an observation?" And I said, "Sure." And he said, "You think you're a real Mr. Good Guy, don't you?" And I just didn't know how to parse that. And I told him, I said, "Well, thanks for the observations." I said, I don't know how to respond to you at this moment, or that I need to, but I'll think about it. But it really hurt me, because I thought I was reaching out, doing something sensitive, but I was misreading this guy. And over the years, I thought about it, and I realized that I was not resonating with his pain. I was resonating with my concept of what was causing his pain, and it was wrong. So there's that. I was trying to be loving, and I remember also that a very close person to me was in their death throes, the last days. And the last words that they said to me was, "Nobody ever loved me." And that hurt me very much too. So you think you're really helping people and doing things. And I don't know if there's a feedback mechanism that needs to occur, or maybe, as Zach was talking about, a more give and take has to happen that's not linear, to get the feel for what you're doing, or what you think you're doing. Anyway,
I think what John just brought up too leads into the fact that love does require vulnerability, and the chance that you might love other people and it not be received well, or you might get hurt in the process. And that's never the easy choice. I mean, it would be much easier to choose to be isolated and to put our heads down and just be with, our family or our friends, and hunger through life that way and kind of live in a bubble. But love requires opening yourself up and being willing to say, I might get hurt in the process. I might have to go through some growing pains to learn more about what this love thing looks like, but it's worth it. And that's not an easy choice, but it is a good choice.
Yeah, that very well could be the main lesson, even, or another lesson from that anecdote there, John. And that's one of Brene Brown's big things as well, is she's really emphasizes the power of vulnerability, but she says anytime that you're vulnerable, you're going to get your butt kicked at some point. You're gonna just get pounded. You're gonna get slapped. You're gonna have it handed to you, and but you're trying. And John, in that circumstance, you were trying. You were trying to reach out, and you were trying to do the loving thing. And I think it is normal. To Kyla's point there, I think it is somewhat normal to just have that bounce back and hit us every once in a while. Doesn't mean it's the wrong thing to do. In fact, that probably goes into that bucket of the right things that are hard, but trying.
I think a lot of those experiences that I've had, especially when I was younger, what led me into psychology was spiritual things that happened to me, strange things. We keep thinking that strange things are spiritual. Well, for me in those days, they were. But also it led to the desire to want to learn why people behave the way they do. And after spending so many years studying psychology, it's almost like I've locked myself in a separate room. And I think a lot of academics do the same thing. It's not that they overdo it, it's that they create kind of a private conversation that the general population doesn't want to really get involved with. But it does explain a lot of things when you start to understand how the brain works and how spiritual aspirations work and how they affect our body, mind, and spirit. And I wish people could, sometimes I wish to write, I wish I could draw, like a comic book. I've often thought if I could create comic pictures, I could express these ideas a little bit more extensively, but I can't draw, so.
I like that idea.
I just, the word that keeps coming through to my mind, just listening to everybody, is forgiveness. I mean, I think that is for me, that's a huge part of the love. And a lot of times it's very much, the love that I'm able to give and put out there and receive to keep my heart open is very much related to my ability to forgive, and to get my humanness out of the way, because it gets in the way a lot. And, and to meet people where they're at and love people where they are is really hard to do. There's people that don't share the same values as I do, that make different choices than I do, that live differently than I do. And there's people that have hurt me. It's been a lot of work and having to find that place of forgiveness and letting that be, for me, it's a way of life. It's not just I forgive because it's the right thing to do. that's how it started. Well, that's what I'm supposed to do. That's the right thing to do. Until I found myself in the midst of it being very much a life-altering path for me. And I'm grateful for that. I mean, I'm grateful for those experiences, but it's amazing to me how I can come up against, some situation or a person or something that I've been hurt or wronged or whatever, or I feel angry, or the bitterness starts to seep in, or I have some resentment I need to start taking care of, because I can't let that fester in me. Because what happens is I can't love anybody when that's inside of me, not just the person I might be angry with. So I have to keep that stuff cleared out as much as possible and work on that all the time. Yeah, so that's a big part of love for me, is forgiveness, and definitely, Jesus's example is surely an example of teaching me about that, and teaching me that it is a way of life. It's not just something you say. It's something that it's an action word very much, and something that you do.
Do we have time for one more example?
Yes, we do.
All right, if not, I'll let it go. Another case history in my life, my crazy life. I had a friend of ours who would often ask us for medical advice, naturopathic advice. So I told him about using a nebulizer and how to use an herbal decoction in a nebulizer for bronchial condition for his wife. And so weeks passed and he did it. And then one day we were having a conversation. He says, I just thought of a great idea to solve my wife's bronchial problem. He says, I'll put this herbal decoction in a nebulizer. And I did, we got the nebulizer, I did that, and it cleared up. So I just want to let you know about that. And I thought, whoa, where did that come from? So, in psychology, that's called kind of forgetful narcissism, or narcissistic amnesia is a technical term. So the narcissism forgot the source that was offering him the advice, and he took it over and gave it back to me. And I realized he was not aware of this. So there's where the kind of forgiveness came into play, because I could understand it. I didn't get into an argument with him, but I did say, are you sure you got that? You just thought that up? He said, oh yeah. So I didn't get into an argument with him, but that's an interesting example that I want to just share with the group.
Thanks for sharing that, John. And it resonates. I feel like I've experienced that in ministry with younger people at least twice a week. So yeah. Well, friends, we are getting close to the end of our time. It's crazy. I've got like 3 pages of things, questions and things to talk about with this. So we'll definitely return to this again. I just want to share something about this, though, that comes from some of my story from this week. I just find this story very perplexing because of the way that we've treated it throughout the last 2,000 years. You would think if Jesus were to say, if you want to follow me, here's what you need to do. And he uses the word commandment, which is a hard word, but I think the way at least the way I interpret that, he's saying is like, you all want commandments, you all want rules to follow. Okay, here's a rule: love people. And he's saying, if you want to be my follower, then love people. Love people the way I've loved you. That's how people will know that you're a follower of mine. You're associated with me. And goodness, we could write a list. We could spend the next hour talking about all the things Jesus didn't say there. He didn't say, attend church or read your Bible or pray or believe certain things. He said, just go love people. And so that's why this story is so perplexing to me, because how do we end up with crusades, and how did we end up with excluding people and all of the behaviors that we've seen over the centuries? I guess it's weighing heavy on my heart because I've had 3 conversations this week, 2 with people much younger than me, and 1 with someone about 20 years older than me, that all express some form of like, because I experienced fill in the blank in a community associated with Jesus, I don't know that I can ever go back there again. And some of those things were all, and we've talked about this at Hope before, associated with fear or with guilt or with shame, or things that kind of creep into the story that are not the story of love. And with one of those conversations in particular, I, reminded the person that the fear that was being stirred up was a random tangent that was taken out of context in the Bible that they were dealing with. That the thing that Jesus talks about all the time is how much God loves us, that God is love, and that all we need to do is love others. And just in that moment, the clear energy shift and the tears that flowed and the desire for hope and healing that took place, even in just a conversation. So I guess I'm saying all that to emphasize, like, we cannot overemphasize this story. We cannot talk enough about the simplicity of what Jesus says here. If you want to be my follower, then love people, and love people in the same way that I've loved you, which is going to be messy and gritty and vulnerable and awkward, and isn't always going to be easy. And in Jesus's case, ends up being pretty dangerous to his own security and safety, to put it mildly. And that's what we're called to. And I think the more that I'm tempted to say talk about it, but I don't think we need to talk about it. I think we need to live it out. And I think that's the point. So I think the final question I'd leave with you tonight, and I don't know that we have time to answer this out loud, and I think that's okay. I think this is a good question to think about personally as you go into your week. And that is, what ways do you think that Jesus is calling you to following him into loving others as Jesus loved you? It's a little bit awkwardly worded, but you get the point from the story. In what ways do you think that Jesus is calling you to follow him into loving others, following that example of loving others in the same way that Jesus has shown you love? Because that's what it's all about, friends. That's the way of Jesus in a nutshell, is loving others in the way that God has loved us. So does anyone have any final thoughts or anything they'd like to say before we end? I don't want to cut anyone off if you've got something on your heart you'd like to share connected to this conversation.
Yeah, I know we've talked a few times in the past about creating like an ideas board in that space that you're in, that sort of, lives on for a little while, and we can always refresh it. But it might be cool to do one that's like, each of us thinking about 10 ways that we can wash other people's feet, proverbially, symbolically speaking, in our own context, and just sort of bringing it to our day and time, into our context. And just, I don't know, I would love to just brainstorm the answer to that question in sort of short form, from everybody's perspective, just how we can live that out. We can do that when we're together someday.
That's the question, right? That's the question. Yes, I think that is something that we can do very soon. Cool. Well, thank you all for gathering here tonight. This has been a wonderful conversation. I appreciate your own vulnerability and willingness to talk about this. Keep an eye out for an email this week about the things that will be coming up that are a little different around the Easter season. And I'm going to close this in a prayer. God of love, may we be loving. May you help us to keep this story and this example in the front of our minds, in the front of our hearts, as we walk into our week. Remind us that we aren't doing this alone, that we don't have to love others out of our own strength or energy reserve, but it comes out of abiding in your love, making our home in your love, and sharing that love with others. So ground us, center us in your love. Fill us with your Spirit and give us the courage to share your love freely, without exception, to everyone we meet. We ask this in the way of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Have a good week, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good
Bye.
week, everyone.